It's the Age Has No Limit podcast. We're here to show and prove that your age shouldn't prevent you from designing and living the life you want. I'm your host, Patrice Davis. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. So this week, my guest is Steve Lozano. Steve is the founder of Vitaes, an online education company. Vitaes provides online career guidance through informational interviews featuring professionals of color. Prior to beginning Vitaes, Steve was a bank executive with 30 years of experience, actually more than 30 years of experience. So Steve started his professional career as a certified public accountant, CPA, and is licensed in the state of California, the good state of California. He is a board member of the Greater Seattle YMCA and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Puget Sound. So I want to make sure I pronounce that correctly. It is Puget Sound, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, Steve, welcome to the Age Has No Limit podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So, Steve, you wrote something that I thought was really, really interesting. So I want to start by probing there. So you said, you believe the best is yet to come. So have you always believed this? And if not, what made you change your perspective?
The answer is no. I use it as a mantra. I stole it from Bill Gates. It's something that he uses all the time. Mm-hmm. And I use it to deal with my insecurities. When I grew up, I really didn't have any huge aspirations. My goals when I was much younger was just basically to have a job. Mm-hmm. I didn't have many heroes, if you will, to look to really, model my career after. Mm-hmm. My goal was just to have a career. But as I developed and as I got into new opportunities, it kind of inspired my interest in doing more and succeeding and, providing for my family. So I learned a lesson for myself, and I think people do learn it in different times in their lives. For me, probably the earliest was when I was going through the corporate banking training program at Bank of America. I didn't have a master's degree. Mm-hmm. I didn't have an education from a well-known school, and I was competing with candidates from a lot of really big schools. And I went to Sac State University, a public university, and it was a pressure-packed circumstance, and I was worried it wasn't going to be good enough. Mm-hmm. And my go-to was, I'll just outwork everybody. I'll just work harder and study harder. And at the end of the session, I ended up placing third among 30 different candidates. Mm-hmm. And there were candidates from Wharton, from Harvard, from all these different schools. And I was a graduate from lowly Sac State University. Mm-hmm. And it kind of proved to myself that I was good enough. Mm-hmm. That was the first time. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, I've learned in an absolute term, I know I'm successful, but it's something I have to continue to tell myself that I'm good enough, that I deal with imposter syndrome all the time. So that's why I say that.
Excellent. Well, that's so interesting. So what made you decide to keep pushing through? You were surrounded by these folks from the Whartons and some of the top business schools around the country. And you somehow made up your mind that, regardless of what's happening around me, and, I'm going to go ahead and work harder. That means that you probably attribute hard work to success. So was there something else that was going on that made you say, I'm going to push through because, even though you may have imposter syndrome, somehow, of course, you still believe that you could do it and that you deserved it. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's for me, the encouragement came from small wins, right? Mm-hmm. Placing really high in a particular exam, mm-hmm. Being singled out by Bank of America management as being an example, mm-hmm. Wanting to be an example for my girls, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Small wins. We're going to pick back up on that because I think that is sort of tied to what you're doing with Vitaes. And so I love that those two words. We're going to definitely go back to that. Now, tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you from? A little bit about your family. I heard you say two girls. Do you have two daughters? Do you have any? I'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, two daughters. Gosh, my oldest one is going to be 40 this year, so
Yeah.
I'm not young anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in California.
Mm-hmm.
My parents are both from Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
from Guanajuato, a small town in Guanajuato, the state of Guanajuato.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a public school kid,
Mm-hmm.
and grew up in the Central Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no most of my cousins and family members did not go to college, and it was my mother, so often is the case,
Mm-hmm.
that said, that told me, "Hey, Steve, you should go to college."
Mm-hmm.
And I really had no idea what to do. I was working in restaurants at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I would just, work full time. And she convinced me that, hey, you're a good student, you should go to college. So I went to a junior college for a couple of years, and she was the one that talked me into getting into business, major in business, because I really had no idea what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my mother had no idea what business really was, but she had heard that. So she said, "Major, you should major in business." So I told my counselor that.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you tell them, you're going to major in business, they start lining up all the courses. So I was taking a beginning accounting course,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a professor, a great guy named Jim Thomas, who, after a few exams, said to me once, "Steve, you're really good at this. You should think about being an accountant." And I really didn't know what that meant, but I knew I could get a job as an accountant. At least I felt like I understood that. So
Mm-hmm.
when I transferred to a four-year university, Cal State Sacramento, I majored in accounting. I got through, got my degree,
Mm-hmm.
and once I started working, studied to become pass the CPA exam is what I did.
Oh, that's excellent. So you definitely, and I think, like you said, it's a lot of times it's the moms that see, the potential that we don't see, and they encourage us to take a certain step. And they're preparing us in a lot of other ways, of course, as we are, being raised from, childhood to adulthood.
Right.
So yeah, so kudos to your mom for noticing that you had that potential, and having you actually register and go to college. So you started your career. You became a CPA. Excellent job on that, by the way. And then you decided somehow you ended up in banking. Would love to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was really kind of the genesis of Vitaes, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I was working as an internal auditor for Bank of America, and they told me I would be traveling 30% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was traveling 75% of the time, and by then I
Wow.
already had two daughters, and
Mm-hmm.
I decided, this isn't working for me, and the work itself was not particularly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had to make a change, but I was really anxious about changing because I didn't know what I was going to change into, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, mortgage, kid, family, I had requirements, right, that I had to
Mm-hmm.
fulfill. And so it was the unhappiness in my career at the time. I remember just, hating to go to work, but I knew I had to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And fortuitous, this is kind of weird. Bank of America, I want to say in '86,
Mm-hmm.
the bank lost $1 billion.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot of money back in '86. Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my manager was asking all of us senior, CPAs who are working in the internal audit department, "Hey, give us an idea of how to reduce our budget because
Mm-hmm.
we're being asked to cut our budget 20% because of the big loss." And I told him, I said, "I know how to cut our budget. Get rid of me." And he looked at me and was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, his name was Steve. I said, "Steve, this is not for me. I
Mm-hmm.
need to do some exploring and find out if there's something else in the bank." So that really kind of triggered my exploration in careers in Bank of America. And so I picked up the phone and did an informational interview with someone who was leading commercial banking. And I chose commercial banking because I had learned that those are the guys people who were making a lot of money at Bank of America at the time. So I picked up the phone, called Kent Steinwert was his name, and I told him what I was doing. I said, "Do you have 30 minutes?" And he said, "Yeah, come on over." So 30 minutes turned into a 2-hour interview. And at the end of the interview, he asked me if I'd be interested in a training program, which
Wow.
I said yes. And they took me, and at the time, I don't think they have it any longer, but Bank of America's corporate and commercial banking training program was the envy of all the banking community. They were really the place to go if you wanted to learn how to be a banker. And that was the genesis of the change. And what I always remember was, how do I learn about doing something else, right? And it was a book that's been around a long, long time. I think it's still in publication. The book is called What Color is Your Parachute?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the book. Haven't read it, but I am familiar with that book. Yes.
I read the book, and the topic was about helping you figure out what to do in life, right? And one of the things I took away from that was go talk to people about their careers. Do a
Wow.
informational interview, right? So it's been around forever. And I employed that tactic and ended up with a new career at the same employment.
And so now I'm starting to thread a number, and then I'm sure you've probably noticed these things too. I'm already starting to think, knowing what I know about Vitaes, and we're going to definitely jump into that up next. I'm starting to see some threads in how Vitaes came to be. You mentioned that you didn't know what you wanted to do. It was your mom that informed you to go and major in business. Neither of you were really clear on what that is, so that lack of clarity, and then you happen to be in these situations where you learned about, these other opportunities through this informational interview. And now we have Vitaes. So I would love for you to tell the audience in your own words what Vitaes is.
Really, Vitaes is a career awareness and exploration website. I'm building this for the 18-year-old me. 18, you get out of school, you graduate from high school, and you just don't have the foggiest idea what you want to do. My analogy is like going to a restaurant, right? If you go to the restaurant, they ask you, what do you want? My first question is always, what's on the menu? What's possible, right? So whether you go to any kind of restaurant, you want to see what are the options. Well, that's my analogy for careers, right? I mean, I think young adults today just don't know what's on the menu. And the tools to help them do that just aren't very good. And that's how I really kind of got started with Vitaes. I pronounce it both ways. Is that young adults need help. They need help in exploring what is it, what kind of career should I have?
Yeah.
So often they're being told, follow your passion. Well, most young adults don't have a pre-existing passion that can turn into a career.
Yeah.
So they need to explore what's possible. But most importantly, I focus on professionals of color because representation matters, right?
Yes.
Seeing others that come from your culture, that come from your background, that you identify with, that are in successful careers makes all the difference. And that's kind of what Vitaes does, is help you see different kinds of careers, whether it's in healthcare, or it's in finance, or it's in law, or whether it's in tech. But you're hearing informational interviews from professionals that look like you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, so Steve and I first connected because Steve, Vitaes is an ed tech company. Grants Works, of course, specializes in grants. We work together. And from the very first time he demonstrated Vitaes, I was in awe because it's such a simple solution, but it's in one place. Because it's funny that you say a lot of young people aren't sure what to do. They've never been in a situation. There's never been a time in our our existence, where we have so much information at our fingertips. But the problem is, if you're a young person, number one, the information is so vast that you can, go down all kinds of rabbit holes. But to have one space, one website, right? And you may have plans for different ways that you plan on having it to be, accessed. But right now, there's a website that has a collection of videos. They're all pre-formatted. All the persons of color from a very wide range of careers are actually answering questions that help a kid who's who's 15 years old or 17 years old or 18 years old, as Steve was, understand what does it actually involve to be, let's say, the general counsel for Starbucks. I think you do have a woman who is, I think it's a Black woman. She's currently, I believe, one of the general counsels for Starbucks. I don't remember her actual role, but so I do think that Vitaes has the potential is amazing. So just kind of sharing with the audience what I thought when I saw Vitaes, and want to provide a little bit more insight just to help you guys visualize what this is. As a matter of fact, I've already asked Steve for a little snippet. So if you stay to the end of this episode, we'll have a snippet of Vitae so you can see it for yourself. So that makes me think about something else, Steve. Your challenges as a person of color in banking, as a bank executive back in the late 80s, early 90s. What was that like for you?
I was, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because I feel really indebted to the people that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my managers were very, very developmental,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they acted selfishly in some form or fashion, because they were looking for the next person, the next talent to help them reach their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was always hustling, they saw that, and candidly, in many of these organizations, it's not what you look like, it's what can you do? What
Absolutely.
can you get done? So I think they looked past, my Latino background is like, hey, this guy can win. We're going to help him win, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I saw the things that I saw, what I'll call prejudices, were really more from my customers and
Interesting.
some managers. So I worked in the Central Valley of California. So a lot of my customers were farmers
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the Central Valley, whether it's
Yeah.
rice, whether it's walnuts, whether it's,
Yeah.
and it goes on and on. And the same way happened here in Washington State, where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very big political divide between Eastern Washington and Western Washington. Western Washington is where Seattle is, and we're a very, very liberal community.
Mm-hmm.
You go to the farm communities, it's very different, right?
Yeah.
And as you might imagine, in a lot of farm communities, they hire and employ a lot of Mexicans and Latinos who are coming up and working the ranches and working
Yeah.
their farms. So I got a lot of pre-existing prejudices from customers, and I had to be very careful what I said when I said it,
Mm-hmm.
to let's say, try to correct their perspectives, because I'm very light skinned. I think a lot of people don't think I'm Latino,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's why.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting too. You just said something that, that a lot of us in the African American community talk a lot about, is having to put on a mask, or somehow having to suppress a part of ourselves to make other people comfortable. And we do it because we have to, in many instances, hey, this is our job. And, actually it's a part of, I would say, and this may be controversial, you need to be able to modulate yourself in certain scenarios. When it becomes a problem is when you're doing it all the time, and you're doing it only to make the other person comfortable, not necessarily to advance something that you want to advance. Sometimes I think that knowing when to do it strategically to get what you want, I don't see anything wrong with that. But when you're doing it and you're covering yourself and you're masking yourself and you're boxing yourself, I say all of that. You see, I have a lot of passion about it because I also experienced it. But I definitely understand. Another thing too is that they're used to engaging with Mexican Americans, or Mexicans, not Mexican Americans. They're used to engaging with Mexicans in one way, and here they are engaging with you as their banking contact. So Any one particular scenario or one thing that you remember that still either makes you feel uncomfortable or that was a lesson for you?
Yeah, a person that won't be named that I used to
Mm-hmm.
work with at a
Mm-hmm.
bank.
Mm-hmm.
We were having a conversation, right, and very in a very social sort of circumstance, and he blurted something out regarding what Mexicans are good for that really stunned me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I thought he was very liberal minded and very fair minded, only to find out he thought very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I had misunderstood his intentions and I misunderstood his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's somebody I respected a great deal. And I was really, I remember coming home and telling my wife what
Mm-hmm.
the person said. And I thought I never would have thought he would have said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was what it was, and
Mm-hmm.
I worked around it, and um, and hopefully over time, sharing my perspective maybe changed his after a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was just stunned that he would say something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to Vitaes, just for a bit, because I think it's important for us to really focus on this because here you are, 30 plus year banking career, and then now you decide to launch a business that, that's not easy. It's not, becoming a consultant that like I did. But I wanted to just get some ideas about what your biggest vision is for Vitaes. What is the grandest vision that you have for Vitaes?
Yeah, my grand vision for Vitae is to help students and career changers
Mm.
uh, to learn about careers that they could transition to or shoot for that will make them more satisfied in their careers and earn them wealth. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, a really good friend of mine, Judge Richard Jones, he
Mm-hmm.
uses a phrase. He says, "Hey, if I'm not at the table, I'm on the menu."
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
think he's right,
Mm-hmm.
and so uh, power in this country comes from wealth,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Face it, those that are making the decisions, it comes from wealth. So
Mm-hmm.
how can I close the wealth gap?
Mm-hmm.
And close the wealth gap, I think the quickest way is through education and through
Mm-hmm.
careers, right? You're able
Mm-hmm.
to build uh, wealth for yourself, build transitional wealth for your family.
Mm-hmm.
I think it changes lives. It's changed mine, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my family didn't come from much money,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had a relatively successful career, and now I'm able to do things just beyond taking care of my family, and I think that's really my mission for Vites.
Yeah. And so, if I remember correctly, Vitae, if you hear us using it interchangeably, we've kind of joked about that we say Vitae, we sometimes say Vitae. I remember that you shared that Vitae has actually been piloted in a number of schools, one in Wisconsin and another in Washington. It's probably been piloted in a few other places. Is there a story about a young person or something that you remember from their interaction with Vitae that really stood out for you, whether it was one person or a group of kids who provided feedback? What is it that keeps you, that you remember that keeps you going to say, yes, I'm on the right path?
Well, this is a little bit away from your question, but
Mm-hmm.
I've got a family friend,
Mm-hmm.
a guy named Steve Rushing, and his nephew he's African American, and he's a professional
Mm-hmm.
with BlackRock. And BlackRock is one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. They manage, and this is a number that is just huge,
Mm-hmm.
$10 trillion, trillion with
Yeah.
a T, not
Yeah.
B.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I interviewed him. His name's
Mm-hmm.
Spencer Sheff,
Mm-hmm.
super smart young man.
Mm-hmm.
And he, by virtue of being African American, got recruited to help with growing
Mm-hmm.
more people of color in his business,
Mm-hmm.
BlackRock, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was talking to an Asian woman that they were trying to recruit, and
Mm-hmm.
so and as he was telling his story, he said, "You know what? Why don't you just go watch my Vites video?"
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "What's that?" So he told her.
Uh,
She went back and watched it, and he said that was instrumental in his company, BlackRock, a multi-trillion-dollar company, being successful in recruiting some minorities.
mhm,
So it's got a lot of different legs. Matter of fact, I'm just had a conversation yesterday with the dean of City University here in Seattle, and they want to use the content to help educators
mhm,
to teach educators about careers and technical education, because a lot of the teachers,
mhm.
the certified instructors who are out there teaching our kids about careers don't know about careers.
Exactly.
They might know how to teach, but they
Mhm,
don't know what it's like to be you know, a banker or a lawyer or a fireman or a cop, or you
mhm.
going on and on. And so they want to use Vitaes as a career tool to teach them how to teach our kids. So that's
You
exciting.
you mentioned that Vitaes has a lot of legs, and it really, really does, guys. When you get a chance, check out Vitaes.com, Vitaes.com, because one of the things I just realized, all of the people that you actually interviewed, maybe ask all of them, would you be okay with posting your Vitaes recording? Well, I don't know if you want to give them access, but I'm just thinking that's even another way that Vitaes could be used, right? If there was a way, like I'm even thinking a partnership with LinkedIn. I don't know if I should put it out there, but I'm just there's so many things that you can do, or even something yeah, so we can have a conversation about that off camera. But a lot of things that can be done with the videos, and of course even the people that are interviewed. There may be a potential role for them, a minimum, very minimum role for them to get more of the word out about Vitaes. So but any particular young person or any story, any feedback? I know we actually saw some of the data that you received from some of the students that were like, they were so surprised that some of these positions, these careers even existed, and that they were so happy to see people that look like them. And I do also want to let everyone know these are Native American, African American, Hispanic American, or Latin American. So there are different types, Asian American, of people of color that are represented in his video. So any stories that about young people that made you say, yeah, I'm on the right path?
Well, just a couple.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, when I do presentations to in schools, I typically try to get a survey done. So I'll ask, I'll leave them with two or three questions. And what you just said is a common refrain. I didn't know anything like this existed. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I didn't know that this was a career.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that I hear pretty often that tells me I'm on the right path.
Mm-hmm. So if you could go back in time, Steve, what would be the advice, the best advice that you give to 15 or even 18-year-old Steve Lozano, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the biggest thing is just trust yourself, trust your opinions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that again, it's always been. It's funny, I can look back on my career, and for in almost every metric, I can say to myself, "You've been successful,"
Yeah.
but I still struggle with this imposter syndrome thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
that so many people do. I haven't been to a psychologist or a
Mm-hmm.
psychiatrist. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
what might be said there, but it's an insecurity that I deal with. And what I've noticed from very successful customers of mine is that they just have this unwavering belief in their own opinions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though they're getting other perspectives, is just trust your gut and go with it. If
Mm-hmm.
take that plus take chances. Don't be afraid to take a chance. Don't be afraid to make a change.
Yeah.
And, especially when you're younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I've got an intern right now that I'm working with. He's a young man. He's going to be a junior in university, and he's thinking about marketing. And what I'm really pushing for him to do is explore, explore, explore.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of getting a door slammed in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Believe in yourself, believe in your judgment, because at the end of the day, you and you alone
Yeah.
are responsible for your life, right? I mean, your parents, they love you to death, and so your family does,
Mm-hmm.
but you're the only one that can make yourself happy, right? So you've got to trust in yourself. And if you work, and this sounds so corny, but it does, if you work hard at things, things will eventually fall your way.
Yeah, yeah. So, what would you say is the biggest difference, just the single biggest difference you notice between being an entrepreneur and being an executive at, working for someone else?
Yeah, I've worked at a lot of big financial institutions, and you
Mhm.
take for granted all the infrastructure that's in place
Yeah.
over there, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I had administrative assistants, and there was always different groups at the bank that I could ask for help in
Mhm.
order to accomplish my mission.
Yeah.
And when you're an entrepreneur in a small organization, that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So you either do it yourself or you learn about it. Like
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about recording and videoing.
Mhm.
I had to learn all that myself. So I got a new computer, and I went to the Apple store and
Mhm.
took all their classes. And
Mhm. I love that.
YouTube is a great teacher, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I just love YouTube. Whenever I'm trying to figure something out,
Yeah.
somebody else has probably already figured it out and recorded it.
Yeah.
Those are the things that as an entrepreneur, it's a lot harder than you think it's going to be.
Mhm.
There's not a group ready to help you do something that you need to get done.
Mhm.
Um, so those are probably the biggest things. It's just a lot harder. It's a lot more difficult, especially not only trying something, being an entrepreneur, but I'm building a business that doesn't really exist before
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So it's navigating a whole bunch of infinite different permutations. So it's
Mhm.
hard to really figure out what's the right way to go because I'm not following anybody else's path.
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely, that's an excellent point. I could say that myself for the kind of business that I have. Not that many people that, specialize in federal grants and then turn it into a business. So I'm kind of, I wouldn't say making it up as I go, but to a certain extent, there is sort of a making it up as you go. Now,
Right.
what is your next big adventure?
My big adventure, personal or professional?
Personal. Hmm.
Well, it's when I decided to retire from banking. Fortunately, I was economically set,
Hmm.
but I would always ask myself, because I liked what I did, and
Hmm.
it was very rewarding.
Hmm.
I would say to myself, if I had, 50 million bucks in the bank, what would I do with my time?
Hmm.
It always came back to two things:
Yeah.
Vitaes,
Yeah.
playing music. So I'm,
Yeah.
I'm I'm a drummer. I love to play music. I love to listen to music.
Hmm.
And so I've played a couple bands.
Hmm.
When I about 5 years ago, I hired a drumming coach
Hmm.
that I usually go to every other week.
Hmm.
And I used to think I was pretty good. Now I know I'm not good. But you know what? I've improved just huge amounts.
Yeah.
I played in a few bands, and I'm looking for one right now. But my dream would be to play in a band with a
Mhm.
big horn section, kind of a funk R&B band,
Yeah.
Tower Power or Earth,
Hmm.
Wind and Fire or
Yeah.
Incognito. Just a
Yeah.
band that just kicks ass, but with a
Yeah.
big horn section and a great bass player. Oh, that just to me that would just be awesome.
Good. Well, I'm hoping to see that happen, and I'm asking you to please share video when that does. It will it will happen.
I've
Um,
got some video, but not of a big horn section. But I've got video of me playing in a band.
good, good, good. Well, guys, I might also ask Steve to share that video so we can put it towards the end of this episode as well. So, Steve, what does an age has no limit life look like to you? What does that mean to you?
You know, another reason that I decided to get out of banking is that I had people close to me pass away suddenly. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're younger, you don't think about dying,
Mm-hmm.
and as you get a little bit older, I had a cousin of mine who was kind of like my older brother.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away suddenly
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, around 62.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my banking mentors passed away suddenly. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, my younger brother passed away suddenly. And it's just a reminder for those of us that don't think about it that, you know what, you've got a finite amount of time here. And it was, hey, you better do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, take chances, travel. And so, when you talk about age has no limits, I think we oftentimes put limitations on ourselves. And so I would say, do what you want to do, whatever it is, whether if it's get fit, start a business, travel, learn a language. I'm doing that too. I'm still trying to learn Spanish, but I'm working at it every day. So go out and do it and don't be afraid of failure.
Okay. Interesting. So I didn't know that you didn't know how to speak Spanish.
Well, interesting, and I'll say this, when my parents immigrated from Mexico, and so often that when they raised their kids in America, they deliberately did not speak Spanish to us because they wanted us to learn English. And I wish they had taught us Spanish when we were babies, but they didn't. And that's common among, baby boomer kids.
Yeah, interesting.
I told my mom I'd learn how to speak Spanish, and I'm still working at it, but I'm going to get there soon.
Yeah, good. I'm sure you will. That and the band, that's all coming. So if you have a bucket list, or if you don't have a bucket list, tell me what's that one thing that you're itching to do. This is different from the adventures. There's something that maybe it's get, $50 million funding for Vitaes. What is it that it's like you want to get this done ASAP?
Yeah, I think this is a professional goal, and that is, reconfigure the website to allow for user-generated content. Because the value of the website is really driven by the depth and breadth of content, right? If you're a student thinking about a career, having more content gives you more options and allows you to learn more about what you don't know. And so that's really kind of a short, medium-term goal that I think will be instrumental in triggering success for Vitaes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd like to thank you, Steve, for joining us on the Age Has No Limit podcast. It's really been fun getting to learn a little bit more about you. I did not know that you didn't speak Spanish, but I won't rub it in. But
it's okay. My cousins do all the time. Those that speak now, it's like, hey, ¿qué pasó?
Yeah, I know, right? And they're probably speaking Spanish around you and you're getting frustrated. But no, I do think it's, again, this was a fantastic opportunity to get to learn more about you. And I love that you decided to take what inspired you and what motivated you and turn it into a solution that schools, universities, companies, even individuals can use. Like you said, Vitaes has legs, and I'm looking forward to seeing it really take off into the atmosphere, just an atmospheric launch, and actually stay there, not just launch, but actually stay there, because it really can help a lot of young people figure out one of the most important decisions they ever have to make, which is, again, what is going to be their career, what is going to be their occupation, so that they're not miserable like some of the people that you mentioned are probably really miserable in their lives right now in our country. But for those of you who are watching or listening, we are going to have a snippet from Vitaes so you can actually see or hear it for yourself. And Steve, thanks again for being yet another example that age has no limit.
Get a roadmap from someone who's traveled it into some of the largest companies like Facebook, Walmart, Amazon, and Starbucks. There are executives and senior partners in the private and public sector, nonprofit and government workers, as well as pro athletes. Welcome to Vitaes.com. The purpose of this website is to feature Black, Indigenous, and people of color discussing their careers, giving insights and advice on the most sought after and little known professions at Vitaes.com.